Welcome to the English Homie podcast. Let's start today's lesson.
Welcome to the English Homie podcast. I am Jack, and this is day 2 of our 7-day Advanced English Vocabulary Challenge. Yesterday, you learned 20 powerful words that can make your English sound clearer and more sophisticated. Today, we are going one step further. You will learn 20 new C1 and C2 level English words that educated speakers use in conversations, academic discussions, professional situations, and formal writing. But here is the important part. Do not simply listen to these words. Repeat them after me. Understand the examples, and imagine yourself using them in a real situation. Stay until the end, because I will test your memory with a quick vocabulary challenge. Are you ready? Let's begin. Word number 1 is elucidate. Elucidate means to explain something complicated and make it easier to understand. You can use it when someone provides additional details or clarifies a confusing idea. For example, the professor used a simple diagram to elucidate the difficult concept. Here is another example. Could you elucidate what you mean by that statement? Instead of saying, please explain this more clearly, you can say, could you elucidate this point? Repeat the word, elucidate. Word number 2 is nuanced. Nuanced describes something that contains subtle differences, details, or meanings. A nuanced opinion is not simply positive or negative. It recognizes that a situation may be complicated. For example, she presented a nuanced analysis of the problem. You could also say, the novel offers a nuanced portrayal of family relationships. If someone examines both sides of an issue instead of making a simple judgment, their perspective is nuanced. Word number 3 is pervasive. Pervasive means existing or spreading throughout a place, system, or society. It is commonly used for something that has become extremely widespread. For example, social media has a pervasive influence on modern communication. Here is another example. There was a pervasive sense of uncertainty throughout the organization. Something pervasive is not limited to one small area. Its presence can be noticed almost everywhere. Word number 4 is scrutinize. Scrutinize means to examine something extremely carefully. When you scrutinize something, you pay attention to every detail because you are searching for mistakes, problems, or important information. For example, the accountant scrutinized the financial records before approving the report. You could also say, consumers should scrutinize the terms of an agreement before signing it. Looking at something casually is not scrutinizing it. Scrutinizing means examining it with serious attention. Word number 5 is equivocal. Equivocal means unclear, uncertain, or deliberately avoiding a definite answer. For example, the politician gave an equivocal response when asked about the new policy. Here is another example. Her answer was equivocal, so I could not tell whether she supported the proposal. An ambiguous statement may have several meanings. An equivocal response often avoids expressing a clear position. If someone refuses to say yes or no, their answer may be equivocal. Let's review the first 5 words. Elucidate means to explain something clearly. Nuanced means containing subtle differences. Pervasive means widespread. Scrutinize means to examine carefully. And equivocal means unclear or non-committal. Pause for a moment and repeat all 5 words. Word number 6 is tenacious. Tenacious describes someone who is extremely determined and refuses to give up. For example, she is a tenacious researcher who continues searching until she finds an answer. You could also say, his tenacious attitude helped him overcome several setbacks. A tenacious person may experience failure, disappointment, or criticism. However, they continue working toward their goal. Tenacious is a powerful word to describe determination and persistence. Word number 7 is conscientious. Conscientious means careful, responsible, and committed to doing your work properly. For example, she is a conscientious employee who always completes her assignments on time. Here is another example. A conscientious student checks their work before submitting it. A conscientious person does not ignore their responsibilities. They care about quality and want to do the right thing, even when nobody is watching. Word number 8 is impeccable. Impeccable means perfect or without any noticeable mistakes. We often use it to describe someone's appearance, manners, performance, or work. For example, his pronunciation was impeccable during the presentation. You could also say, the hotel is famous for its impeccable service. If someone arrives wearing a perfectly neat suit, you can say, he looks impeccable. This word expresses an exceptionally high standard. Word number 9 is salient. Salient means the most important, noticeable, or relevant part of something. For example, the speaker summarized the most salient points of the discussion. Here is another example. One salient feature of the application is its simple design. When a report contains too much information, you should focus on its salient details. In other words, concentrate on the points that matter most. Word number 10 is plausible. Plausible means reasonable or believable. However, something that sounds plausible is not necessarily true. For example, she gave a plausible explanation for arriving late. You could also say, the theory seems plausible, but we still need evidence. This distinction is important. A plausible story sounds as though it could be true. Evidence is still required before we can confirm it. You have now learned 10 advanced words. Let's do a quick memory check. Which word means perfect or without mistakes? The answer is impeccable. Which word means determined and unwilling to give up? The answer is tenacious. And which word describes the most important point? The answer is salient. Excellent work. Let's continue. Word number 11 is arbitrary. Arbitrary describes a decision that is based on personal choice, chance, or preference rather than a clear reason or fair system. For example, the deadline seemed arbitrary because nobody explained why it had been chosen. Here is another example. Employees complained that the new rules were arbitrary and inconsistent. If a teacher gives different grades without following any standard, the grades may appear arbitrary. An arbitrary decision lacks a reasonable or transparent basis. Word number 12 is complacent. Complacent means being too satisfied with your current success and failing to recognize possible problems. For example, the team became complacent after winning several matches. You could also say, businesses cannot afford to become complacent in a competitive market. Confidence can motivate you to improve. Complacency can make you stop improving because you believe nothing can go wrong. That is why complacent usually has a negative meaning. Word number 13 is paradoxical. Paradoxical describes something that appears contradictory, but may contain an important truth. For example, it seems paradoxical, but slowing down can sometimes help you finish your work faster. Here is another example. The more choices people have, the less satisfied they may feel, which seems paradoxical. A paradoxical statement initially sounds impossible or illogical. After thinking about it carefully, however, you may understand the truth behind it. Word number 14 is impartial. Impartial means fair and not supporting one person or side more than another. For example, a judge must remain impartial throughout the trial. You could also say, we need an impartial person to evaluate both proposals. An impartial decision is based on facts, rather than friendship, emotion, or personal preference. The opposite of impartial is biased. Word number 15 is inevitable. Inevitable means certain to happen and impossible to avoid. For example, some mistakes are inevitable when you are learning a new skill. Here is another example. After weeks of disagreement, a serious conversation became inevitable. If something is inevitable, you may delay it, but you cannot prevent it completely. Change, uncertainty, and occasional failure are inevitable parts of life. Here is another quick challenge. Imagine that a successful company stops improving because it believes it cannot fail. The answer is complacent. Now imagine that a decision is made without a clear or logical reason. Which word describes that decision? The answer is arbitrary. And which word means fair and unbiased? The answer is impartial. Word number 16 is reconcile. Reconcile has two useful meanings. It can mean restoring a friendly relationship after a disagreement. It can also mean finding a way to make two opposing ideas or situations compatible. For example, the two friends reconciled after talking honestly about the misunderstanding. You could also say, she struggled to reconcile her career ambitions with her family responsibilities. When you reconcile differences, you find a way for them to exist together peacefully. Word number 17 is circumvent. Circumvent means to find a clever or indirect way around a difficulty, restriction, or rule. For example, the company found a legal way to circumvent the outdated regulation. He tried to circumvent the security system, but his attempt was discovered. Circumvent does not mean solving a problem directly. It means avoiding the obstacle by taking a different route. Depending on the situation, this action may be intelligent, dishonest, or even illegal. Word number 18 is disseminate. Disseminate means to spread information, ideas, or knowledge widely. For example, the organization uses social media to disseminate important health information. You could also say, researchers presented at the conference to disseminate their findings. People disseminate news, research, knowledge, and public information. It is a more formal alternative to the words spread or distribute. Word number 19 is vindicate. Vindicate means to prove that someone was right or not responsible for something they were accused of doing. For example, new evidence vindicated the employee who had been blamed for the mistake. The success of the project vindicated her decision to invest in the new technology. If people criticize your decision, but later results prove you were correct, those results vindicate you. Vindication often comes after doubt, blame, or criticism. Word number 20 is ephemeral. Ephemeral means lasting for only a very short time. For example, online trends are often ephemeral and disappear within a few weeks. You could also say, the beauty of the sunset was breathtaking, but ephemeral. A rainbow, a fashion trend, or a moment of fame can be ephemeral. This sophisticated word reminds us that some experiences are beautiful precisely because they do not last forever. You have now learned all 20 advanced words from day 2. Let's test your memory before we finish. Which word means to examine something very carefully? The answer is scrutinize. Which word means reasonable or believable, but not necessarily true? Which word describes something that appears contradictory? The answer is paradoxical. Which word means to spread information widely? The answer is disseminate. Which word means to prove that someone was right or innocent? The answer is vindicate. And which word describes something that lasts for only a short time? The answer is ephemeral. Now, choose 4 words from today's lesson. Create one original sentence with each word. Then, write at least one of those sentences in the comments. Your sentences do not need to be impeccable. Making mistakes is an inevitable part of learning. What matters is that you remain tenacious, conscientious, and willing to improve. This was day 2 of the 7-day Advanced English Vocabulary Challenge. I am Jack, and you have been listening to the English Homie podcast. Subscribe to the channel and join me for day 3, where we will explore 20 more powerful English words. Until next time, keep learning, keep speaking, and never become complacent about your progress. See you in day 3.